Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. We are starting very shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, um, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good day, wherever you're joining us from. You came to the right platform. It's 2 o'clock Ugandan time and 1 o'clock South African time. Our seminar is starting. Let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Hlamalani Ngwenya. I'm from South Africa. I'm a lecturer at the University of Free State, but also an international development consultant. I will be your host. You are stuck with me for the next, 2 hours, and I hope we will be faring together. Let me remind you again why we are here. We are here because we are attending a webinar, which is a webinar number 9, which means Ruforum has been organizing such webinars. Today's webinar theme is delivering agriculture and advisory services in post COVID-19 era. We will be having discussions around issues of rural advisory services. What are the challenges and opportunities within the pandemic context? But also we're going to look at extension services to smallholder farmers in the new normal. We are going to talk a little bit about some innovations, but also how do we build robust, effective systems within the context of, COVID and beyond. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are there on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And this event is streaming live. Let me take you through how we going to spend the time together. Firstly, we will be sharing we're doing the opening and welcome. We are going to have panel discussion. We have powerful people. I will introduce them when the time comes. After the panel discussion, we're also going to have someone who's going to give us a summary of what we have heard about in the form of discussion. But we have dedicated some time where we want to do Q&A. A dialogue can never be a dialogue without a dialogue. So we're dedicating time for Q&A, but I will guide you as we get there. Then we're going to have some closing remarks and we'll be good to go. Some housekeeping rules. This is very important. Firstly, I have some housekeeping rule for my panelists. They know we have discussed already. Please, when your time comes, stick to your allocated time so that each one of us will have enough and sufficient time to share. But most importantly, we still need to share and take Q&A with our participants. When you are not talking, please mute yourself. I can see you have already done that. But I would like to encourage you to look at the Q&A icon there, so that when the attendees have questions, they will be asking questions, and feel free to respond to some of the questions during the session using that icon there. To our attendees, Also, I would like to encourage you to use, the Q&A to ask questions. And when you do that, please specify whom you are addressing the question to. But on the other hand, you can use your chat box to put, comments. If you want to have, some interactions, if you have liked what our panelists are talking about, use that, so that we have a very lively session. As promised, we will have dedicated time where you will be taking, questions and all that. This meeting is recorded, but also we have simultaneous translation. We have English as a main language, but we have translation in French and Arabic. So those of you who like translation, you look at your screen, there is a a globe, icon there. You click on that icon and you can, choose French or choose Chinese for the Arabic translation. You also have an option if you want to listen to both French and the translation, then you can actually choose. Okay, so if you choose mute original audio, you're not gonna hear the English part. You only hear the translation part. But if you want to listen to both, you don't have to choose, to click that mute button. Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your safety belt because we are starting. In my culture, when you visit someone and they don't welcome you, you don't feel free. So at this point in time, I would like to call upon, somebody who's gonna represent RUFORUM to welcome us. But before she does that, let me tell you a little briefly about who she is. She is, of course, Dr. Florence Maega Nakayiwa. She's a Deputy Executive Secretary for in the Planning, Resource Mobilization and Management. Before she joined RUFORUM, she used to work at Makerere University. She has over 20 years of experience in the higher education sector, not only in Uganda, but in Africa. She has a lot of experience in policy engagement, development partners, collaboration, partnerships, development, networking, and she's bringing this wealth of knowledge to the RUFORUM Secretariat. At this point in time, I would like to call upon Dr. Florence to welcome us. Dr. Florence, over to you.
You are the host with that welcome. It is superb. Thank you very much, Dr. Ngwenya, and you're doing it so well. Dr. Ngwenya from the University of the Free State, South Africa, who is our moderator for this 9th RUFORUM webinar on the topic delivering agricultural advisory services in the COVID-19 era. Thank you very much for joining us. To our distinguished panelists and participants joining this webinar, you are most welcome. During the initial stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, RUFORUM, a network of 128 universities in 38 African countries, explored avenues to reach out and be part of the solution for this era that has impacted all ages, professions, disciplines, and countries. The RUFORUM webinar series, a part of the initiative to put our heads together and explore different perspectives and galvanize actors into collective action and response to address the effects of the pandemic on both the agricultural sector and the higher education sector, which we represent as RUFORUM. As a network of universities, we acknowledge that the pandemic has been particularly brutal to education in general and higher education in particular. And this is not from the health perspective, we all know. We know that universities were closed, and in some way or another, others are still closed as a result of COVID-19. Research processes came to a grinding halt, and community engagement has been almost non-existent. Not to mention the increased incidence of inequity in access to higher education has disadvantaged communities slide further because of lack of access to the internet and other forms of connectivity. This webinar, the ninth in a series of 14, is exploring delivering agricultural services in agricultural advisory services in the COVID-19 era. We appreciate that agricultural sector has not been spared by COVID. Moreover, the pandemic came at the backdrop of desert locusts, army fallworm, and floods in different parts of the African continent. Therefore, we are wondering, how do we turn around these experiences for the benefit of the African farmer, characterized as a subsistence smallholder? How can we improve production and productivity across the value chain? Noting that issues of post-harvest and access to markets have been key challenges since the onset of COVID. As we explore how agricultural advisory services can be delivered, we draw parallels and lessons for research and community engagement for the universities. We at True Forum believe that this is the opportunity for a multi-sectoral and multidisciplinary dialogue. Dr. Ngwena mentioned that, and a multidisciplinary dialogue to explore solutions for not only for advisory services, but for other aspects that will enhance agriculture on the continent. The panel of experts we have for this 9th webinar is diverse and draws experience from agricultural practice, the development world, and the academe. We especially welcome Irene from Gulu University, our PhD candidate, who will share their thoughts and how agricultural advisory services can be delivered in this new normal. Thank you, our panelists, for agreeing to share your knowledge and experience with the participants. To all of you participants, you are most welcome. Ruforum thanks you for honoring our invitation to participate in this webinar. We look forward to hosting you again. Please do come again in the series that we have. We have the 10th webinar on the 7th. And Dr. Ngwenya, we greatly appreciate your participation. Thank you for moderating this. Please remember, all of you, that the webinars are recorded and they will be available on the True Forum website. Thank you very much, Dr. Ngwenya. Karibu sana. Thank you.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. In my culture, when the host welcomes you, then you can feel free, you do as you wish. So we welcome you. We would like you to feel free, use the chat box. Let's engage. At this point in time, let me unveil our speakers, our panelists for today. I'm going to introduce them one by one, but what I would like to share with you is that we have the richness. When you talk about agricultural extension in the world, that is where we have, these people here. We're gonna hear perspective from the global element, but we also hear perspective from the African continent, but also from the regional continent. I mean, the regional perspective. We're gonna hear perspective also from universities and also the student perspective. And we have different countries that are represented here, but I'm going to introduce them one by one. So just for you to know what to expect, I will pick a panelist, introduce him or her, ask a few questions, and give him or her 8 minutes to go through and responding to those questions. We're gonna start from the top. We start from the global. I would like to present to you Dr. Carl Lassen. Let me say a few words about who he is. He's currently the Executive Secretary for the Global Forum for Rural Advisory Services. He's based in Switzerland, but he's Danish. So he's not new to agriculture extension. He has worked as a senior agriculture education consultant, mainly in the World Bank, but also he worked for the Food and Agriculture Organization. Beyond that, he also worked, with the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in Vietnam on issues of agriculture extension reform. From Vietnam, he went all the way to Ethiopia. He also worked in Kenya through, the institution for the International Livestock Research Institute. He holds a PhD and master degree in tropical animal husbandry from the University of Copenhagen in Denmark, but also he has a master's in public administration, also from Copenhagen. Carl, welcome. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much.
While I ask you, the questions that you were requested to respond to. From the global perspective, how can we build robust and effective extension and agricultural services, programs, and innovations that are responsive to the pandemic crisis? Secondly, I would like you to touch on, the changes that you think are required for the current agriculture extension and advisory services, programs, and tools, so that, we become more responding to respond to the emerging needs, not only in the COVID context, but to ensure that, the whole food supply chain, it's not disturbed, and to assure that farmers' income is sustained during the pandemic. Yes. So over to you. You can tell, I want to hear a little bit your voice, and then you can go on and respond to the questions.
Thank you very much, Khalami. I use your first name, sorry. And thank you very much to Reforum for inviting me to present here. I have actually looked mainly at it from an African context, since Reforum is African, but I can draw lines to the I mean, what's happening in Africa is to many degrees the same we're seeing globally with this pandemic. The inability to move, all the restrictions that have affected agriculture very heavily. So I will speak from the perspective of Africa, and then are you presenting my?
Yes, it's there.
Sorry, am I presenting myself, or are you presenting my?
It is there. It's there already.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. So what I see in Africa when asking, what is needed and how do we build a strong extension? My answer is that Africa actually has another capacity and knowledge in addressing that question. And so my point is that you need basically local solutions, and you need to tap into the local knowledge pool to do that. But the challenge that I see, especially in Africa, that's my point number three, is that we might discuss here in this forum, and I guess most of us are intellectuals, academics, what needs to be done. But if you do not have the political will to allocate the required resources and make the institutional reforms necessary, if you don't have this will, we might know that there's a reform button to press, but we are unable to press that reform button. Coming from academia, coming from extension, it is, to me, the biggest. We can discuss for a long time what is needed, but if there's no political will to put in the money that is required and make the institutional reforms that is needed, when we can have this discussion forever. And I'm sorry to see, I have seen that also in higher education. So let's see a little bit on what are the changes happening right now. So you have really seen an accelerated introduction of, we have talked for long about how do we make extension, e-extension, what we call it, so digitalizing extension. And the COVID have just pushed the whole world to do it by default, by random. So we need to capture what have people been doing and how can we do that. So there's now a global raised awareness of the need to have more blended approaches to extension and agricultural services. And we see that a lot of value chains have disrupted. Many farmers have not been able to sell their products or to plan for a new season, but some have been able to find creative ways of using Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp to get in contact with consumers and make direct links to consumers. And some of them that we have heard around the globe is actually not going back to traditional value chains because they have found out it's much more profitable to make this direct link with the consumers. And that is, so it has also been a wake-up call both for government and consumers that having, if you're a net food importer, that if the global system breaks down, what do you do? So much more attention to local demand for local food products, connection with the producers, and a reassurance on food quality and nutritional value. And I see that as a huge potential for agriculture, that you have this consumer attention, government attention, that you need to be able to have shorter value chains with the high quality products where you know where come from. But so that's on the positive. On the negative, we have all this million of people who have been pushed into unemployment and poverty. So looking at what I see as a change of things happening, we see right now, we see the huge increase in demand for advice from the farmers. How do I produce under a lockdown? How can I get farm labor? Is that safe for me, or do I expose my family to the pandemic? How do I relate to the producers? All this are a massive amount of new questions coming on from the farmer side. And then they are all constrained financially, so they don't really have the funds to pay for advice. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have had in rural extension, and that we continue to have, the lack of ability of the client to pay for the product that they get. I'll get back to that. So we also see this global decrease in human mobility and interaction, and there's a global discussion. What is worst? Is it the disease, or is it the policies that have been imposed to limit the disease? And I'm not going to that one. But we also see an accelerated innovation and introduction of digital tools, and I think we really need to embrace that in agriculture in general, and especially in extension. And we are working closely with YPART, which is the youth network, and we see from them that a lot of the startups which has started has crashed due to the pandemic, but a lot of other young people see a potential in this renewed interest in food production, local food production, especially horticulture and other short-term, high nutrition, short-term crops. So while we see problems in one part of the sector, there are opportunities in other parts of the sector. And this, we will have a global, I think what comes out of this is a re-attention to agriculture and to food production. And I think we will see in the future, we will see an increased, that will be spelled out in an increased funding for agriculture. Of course, the health sector immediately will take a lot of funds, but I actually think there will be an increase in funding for agriculture. The question is if it will be only a share of the national budgets, and if it's a shrinking national budgets because of the economic crisis, but it still would mean that there'll be more money coming in, more attention to agriculture. And I think agriculture has to grasp that, being it in extension, in research, or in education. The degree that increased attention to agriculture in general will also spill over to extension. I'm questionable. We really need to raise the flag, but without extension, it will not happen by default. So we need to deliberately speak with governments about the importance of extension. We can't just think that it will happen. So what is the deputy from Reform was saying that this crisis of COVID is not coming alone, coming on top of a lot of other crises globally and especially in Africa. So what is the problem? The problem, as I said before, is that with the extension, you have an extension worker who works with the farmer, but the farmer is not the employee. It is either the government or an NGO or a company that is the employer. That means that the accountability of the extension worker is not towards the client, but towards the employer. And that gives a disconnect in accountability. And so if you give a bad advice to the farmer or a non-relevant advice to the farmer, how does your employer know that you are not doing what you're supposed to? This system is not making the accountability should be between the client and the extension officer, not the extension officer and the employer. And we need to see how we can invent system that speaks to that. So what changes are required? I think that we really have to embrace the digital revolution. And I must admit, when I think that this face-to-face interaction that we have been used to for decades, almost centuries, that is going to disappear over time. For two reasons. Now we have the pandemic and the decrease in movement, but also because it is an extremely expensive way of conveying and interacting between the extension officers and the farmers. And it simply makes extension non-profitable, and it means that the private sector is not moving very much into extension. So I think what should happen, I doubt it will happen, but what should happen is we had to sort of rethink extension and completely transform extension systems. And I have an example that, you know, all the resources that we today use for transports and vehicles and per diems and getting the extension officers out to the farmers, that has to be done digital. And then you have people in the village who are the interconnection between the farmers and the extension officers, who has a smartphone and other digital devices. And then you have the extension officers in call centers in cities. And then you use picture images, you use SMS, you use WhatsApps, you use all these digital tools. That would make it much more efficient. And if farmers should pay for advice, it would mean if they got a useful advice, they would come back and pay again. If they got a crap advice, they will start subscribing to your advice, and you get this accountability running between the person that you are interacting with and the person you give advice and the value of the advice you give. Maybe $0.50 is too much, maybe it's 10 cents or whatever it is. But if you could get a financial mechanism in, and it should be easy with mobile money nowadays. All this technologies is there. We just need to learn to embrace them. So that was my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carl. As you are presenting, I could see that you are really coming with, you know, those robust, you know, alternatives that we have to think about in this new normal. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions for Carl, use, you know, the chat box or the Q&A and send, you know, those questions. And Carl, you can pick some of the questions that you want to respond to during the session, but we also have dedicated time where we can talk and hear and respond to those questions. Without any waste of time, ladies and gentlemen, now we are flying all the way from Switzerland, and now we are going to Uganda. Here, let me present to you Dr. Selim Nadi. I'll spend a bit of time to tell you who he is. You can see some similarities with Dr. Selim Nadi and Carl, in the sense that they have both experience with extension, but also in research, and also experience in different countries. So this is the executive director of the African Forum for Agricultural Advisory Services. Having worked with GIFRAS and AFAS and other networks, AFAS is one of the leading, you know, or innovative institution or organization when it comes to issues of agricultural extension and advisory services. He brings over 30 years of experience in the context of, you know, agricultural advisory services, but also his he also comes from the research component, and he led the team that designed the National Agricultural Advisory Services in Uganda, which is called the NAVS. But prior to that, he was also director of the Kawanda Agricultural Research Institute, also in Uganda. Dr. Salim Nadi holds a BSc in zoology, botany, and botany in Makerere University, but also he has a master's in entomology from Sudan in the University of Khartoum. He also has a PhD from the University of Reading in the UK. You can see how he's a global citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, I have some few questions also for him. Dr. Salim Nadi, may you please unmute yourself? Let's see if your voice can be heard. Dr. Salim?
Hello, Lami, Dr. Lami, glad to see you and all the forum and the participants.
Yes. Okay, so what I'm going to do so that people can hear, you can also unmute you can enable your video. Let me stop a little bit so that we can see you on the video.
Yeah, it is. The video is on.
It's on. You might have to go up a little bit. There we go. There we go. Yes. So keep your video on so that we can see your presentation and the video at the same time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah,
now you are fine. So the questions that we are asking you, or what you were asked to prepare, we are looking at the rural advisory services. We're looking at the challenges and opportunities in the pandemic era. So we are saying, how is the extension and agricultural advisory system in the region coping with this COVID, especially these containment and the restrictions and all that? The second question that I would like you to respond to: what regional actions and resources are needed for the alignment of agricultural extension and advisory services systems in this so-called new normal? What is your take on this?
Well, thank you very much. Basically, I think just starting from rapidly from COVID itself, we know it is all over the world. And in Africa, the effect has been very massive. We know that there's been underreporting because of testing and so on. And the death is slightly lower. But it has certainly disrupted lives and livelihoods everywhere in Africa. Not a single country has been spared it. And it has triggered an unparalleled economic disruption. And we think it will actually create instability and unrest and conflict if it is not managed. Certainly, it is not only a health crisis because of the issues of lockdown, the issues of distancing, and so on. And certainly, it is going to increase, especially in agriculture, issues of poverty, inequalities, and so on. And making achievement of SDGs a challenge, and especially the CAADP goals are going to be heavily affected. And this needs really responses, global responses. And for Africa specifically, the response are very many, which I'll talk a bit as we move on ahead. Because if it is not responded to properly and appropriately, it's going to be catastrophic. But we have to say that some of these issues are also interlinked. While COVID is there, there's been this fall armyworm, there's locusts, there's flooding, there's all kinds of problems. So specifically in agriculture, some of the impacts, the issues of input supply has been a problem. So access to input, and also even to land, where, as we know, some of our farmers, especially they live in the cities, in the towns, and they have to commute and so on. So access has been a problem. And of course, reduced wages and so on is also there, which is specifically in agriculture. Shortage of labor, a lot of labor migration and so on has been greatly affected. and post-harvest losses, especially in perishable commodities, and controlling pests and diseases, especially in some of those commodities. Transportation has been, transport restrictions have been there, especially along the value chain in the marketing and so on and so forth. Limited access to markets has been a very serious problem indeed, and of course reduced food availability and purchasing power, and of course general impact on humanitarian operations. So the impacts have been on production, in harvest, post-harvest activities, in storage, in transportation, in the market, and consumption, all through the chain, the value chain. Yeah, I can go to, so that's generally the challenge which has been there. So in extension, especially the liver extension, some of the issues have been highlighted by Carl. Fortunately, Dr. Carl has highlighted some of these things. As I mentioned, lockdowns have been there, and it's not only in the towns, but mostly rolled out up to the rural areas. Restrictions on contacts and so on, which has affected the way extension workers interact with the farmers and so on. And this has affected technology transfer, innovations, information flow, knowledge flow, and market access, and a lot of other issues like financial systems and so on. And we know in all these areas, extension and advisory service is very critical in supporting them, and then in introducing strategies for resilience and absorbing shocks. Next one.
Yep.
Well, in Africa, fortunately, and some of those are some of the opportunities we have. Extension workers are trained, and generally they are very close to the communities and trusted, and they reach the local communities. They are the local technical reach in the agricultural sector to the communities, and they have some of the skills, communication skills, and which has been also used in a lot of cases of past diseases and pandemics and epidemics. Extension workers have always been called in for issues of HIV/AIDS in West Africa, on Ebola, avian influenza in other places, natural disasters, as I mentioned, in floods and so on, and pest infestations and so on. They have been called in because of their reach and the trust the communities have on them. Yeah, move on. Well, of course, there are challenges, but there are certain specific solutions. One of the things that we know is that there are some areas of capacity issues, which Carl has mentioned. But fortunately, in Africa, there are some methods and tools which have been being rolled out even before the COVID pandemic came in. Use of digital tools, mass media, and so on has been happening slowly, but this is now an opportunity to roll it out, and it has been quite effectively used. Extension workers specifically continue, and that is where their strengths are in developing packages or practices, especially the do's and the don'ts and so on, especially within context of COVID. But not only that, they have been able to participate in developing some of these packages and also passing on the information, especially as I mentioned in areas previously where there has been Ebola, there has been HIV issues and so on, and avian flu. And then there's the issue of using mass media, not only in the marketing. Carl mentioned a few of that, and mass media has been actually the means in the agricultural sector now, and especially specifically in extension where movement has been restricted. Face-to-face meetings have been curtailed and so on. Mass media has been used, and we can now, for example, Farm Radio International, have been using radio, but there have been videos as well, use of videos, using of digital tools, ICT tools, WhatsApp, and so on. There have been a lot of WhatsApp groups doing marketing, doing sharing information on production, and so on and so forth. And it is massive. And quite frankly, as you know, the youth probably constitute about 60% of the population in Africa. And they have been the champions. And they are really, as they enter agriculture, that's our hope. Not only in farming, but also in advisory services. Promoting farmer production, farmer producer organization. This is critical because you want farmer-owned interventions which they can share by themselves, but also technically aided by extension workers in their communities and at institutional level. And then issues of connecting to and harnessing psychological and behavioral, not only counseling, but also changes. Because those are there. During COVID, there are behavioral changes which are needed. You know, for us in Africa, we hug each other when we meet, during funerals, during meetings, you are with children, they stand all over the place. There's dancing, there's all kinds of celebrations. Africa is a celebrating country all the time. Whatever problems come in, there's some celebrations. And usually those kinds of meetings can transmit. So that's also required. And the other one is the university curriculum, which actually needs to be continuously updated and upgraded. Unfortunately, we have a forum which is hosting this. And I think now we need issues which are connected to what the last point is. You know, we need foresight, issues of foresight. What can you do in cases of pandemic of this nature or other nature, and so on and so forth? These courses are needed on issues of use of digital tools. In fact, actually the extension system now should focus more, like Carl said, and especially at curriculum level, on use of digital tools, mass media, new methodologies, and so on and so forth, and rolling it out. And the last thing is, on this point, is the use of, well, there's foresight. And we have actually launched a foresight for agricultural extension advisory services thematic working group under AFAS now. And it is being rolled out in very many countries for purposes of having foresight, but also intervention measures. Some specific examples I'll bring up. Instead of China, I'll bring up the last one. Several countries, and they have been in webinar meetings, they have been in Zoom meetings, they have been in WhatsApp groups, and so on. Uganda specifically had a very big meeting recently, and its focus was on COVID and its coping mechanism, and they launched an e-extension. So there's a huge public awareness program in Uganda. Kenya also had one. Sudan is also spearheading it, Malawi, and several other countries which I can't mention here, Nigeria, and so on and so forth. This includes engaging extension workers through mass and electronic media by the ministry and the private sector, and through working groups and so on in mitigating COVID-19 impacts in agriculture. China, of course, is probably because they had COVID very early on. The whole ministry establishment is already on it. India as well, Iran, and many other countries are basically working on those programs, which are sort of digital, but as well as promoting mass media and so on, their operationalization. So thank you very much. And I don't know when will the World Mask Week be, but I think we certainly need it, and so that we promote mask wearing as a mitigation measure, not only in extension, but in all our working life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Selim. I'm hearing you echoing what Carl has mentioned, the whole issue of digitalization. I guess, digitalization is our new normal. Ladies and gentlemen, without any waste of time, now we are moving from East Africa, we are coming to Southern Africa. Welcoming here Dr. Cliff Dlamini, who is an executive director for CADESA. So CADESA stands for the Center for Coordination of Agriculture Research and Development in Southern Africa. Dr. Lamini also has a wealth of knowledge. He comes all the way from Eswatini, but he has worked in Zambia. He has done a lot of work. He has also worked here in South Africa. He also brings research expertise, but also extension expertise. And he has worked a lot also with, he became, a manager for the Table Mountain Fund of, the WWF in South Africa, in Cape Town. He holds a PhD in forestry from the University of Stellenbosch here in South Africa, but also he holds other five other degrees. So you can see that, we have powerhouses that we have today who are sharing with us, experiences not only from the theoretical perspective, but also bringing theory and practice together. Dr. Lamini, let us hear your voice. May you please unmute yourself and enable your video so we can see you while okay. So the questions that we would like to hear from you: what are the experiences of CADESA in coordinating research and linkages with agriculture extension and advisory services, especially in Southern Africa? The second question that I would like you to speak to is, how can we strengthen, these research and extension linkages, especially now in the so-called new normal? Over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ngwenya. I would like to actually thank all my fellow panelists and all our participants. We are grateful that you are here, because without the participants, this would not have been a success. So CADESA actually was formed as a sub-regional organization of SADC after the realization that there was so much good research that was done in the region, but there was a disconnect between research, extension, and the farmers. So at CADESA, farmers are a very critical stakeholder, because in terms of food security, sustainable livelihoods, and transformation livelihoods, they are at center stage. So to get into the issues, what was realized before CADESA was formed, which continues to be a challenge, but we're trying to do something which I will talk about later. The weak linkages, as I said, there was actually weak linkages and a disconnect between research, extension, and farmers. There was then a need to strengthen the linkages in order to enhance what is called knowledge translation. Because without knowledge translation, all the research and the good work can go to waste. It's like storing wine in a bottle and not drinking it. So then there was uncoordinated information among the stakeholders. Then there's a need now to collaborate the generation and dissemination of technologies and innovation in the region. Those are the key issues that I thought I would talk about. Then what the center has done, we have actually driven the process of establishing partnerships in the region. We have actually encouraged research and extension joint planning activities, where on one table you find many stakeholders who have got maybe varied priorities and needs, but then coming to reach a consensus, which is important for transformation. CADESA has also spearheaded the participation of extension workers in adaptive research trials, because we cannot leave it only to the scientists, because most of the time the farmers now interact with the extension officers. So now there's participation of those extension workers in the real business of research. Then the building of capacity and training and capacity building will always be a continuous process. CADESA is actually leading programs and coordinating programs on training and capacity building in agriculture research and development in the region. We also, if you visit the website, you will find that we've developed an ICKM system. We've got some knowledge products which are generated in different centers within the region. So we have a rich portal of information which you can just use without wasting resources by repeating some other works unnecessarily. Then now coming into the second question, how can research and extension linkages be strengthened in the new normal, which is now COVID and post-COVID? Because COVID has put a different dimension altogether to our work. So I'll go again to this phenomenon. The agriculture sector is now going towards digitalization, even in the SADC region. We have a big program which is funded by international donors, which is now trying to look at digitalization. Then we want to create an enabling environment that supports the promotion of ICT tools for agriculture transformation, because now this is how we remotely influence agriculture research and development in the region. CADESA has got some mobile apps. The mobile apps now, as I speak, there's one that was launched in Zambia. There's another one which will be launched in Eswatini very soon. I think it maybe is being launched this week. So we're also moving forward with apps. Extension workers are at the forefront of those of the launches that we're doing. Then I think this point is a point which is universal now, where we continue to lobby governments and the private sector for increased investment in digital infrastructure to cover the entire 16 SADC countries. The private sector now is recognized as a potential partner that can drive agriculture research and development forward. We note that the private sector was moving parallel to the public sector in this regard. Then building capacity for research extension services actors in the use of digital technology. Like I've said, we're launching mobile apps. So agriculture research staff are involved here. So it means now the technology now is going to the people that are going to be in the field. It's not going to be kept within us or in the universities or research centers, but the extension people are at the forefront. So now the other issue is promoting e-extension. So e-extension is not very new in the Southern Africa region, but now we're trying to promote it as much as we can to bridge the gap between agriculture research, extension services, and farmers. Then I continue, the strengthening of public-private partnerships in enhancing technology dissemination and research innovation remains very critical for CADESA getting into the new normal. Then strengthening effective communication links between researchers and extension workers. I think the communication between the two is very critical. As I said, most of the research was done for academic purposes, but now as CADESA, we link the academia with the research centers as well as the extension officers. Then the increased capacity of extension officers is one of the key issues that is actually sort of a cutting across. We promote the use of simple community-friendly ecosystems because some of the communities that we deal with are remote. So we're mindful of the kind of e-systems that we are going to promote as a region. So we know our stakeholders, we did livelihood analysis, we know how they are, we profile them. So even the e-systems that we are going to be promoting will be befitting and we have a wide coverage to make sure that they are effective as they'll reach most of our stakeholders. Then we want to continue to establish effective farmer feedback mechanisms through extension so that programs can be improved. Because the one-way traffic of just taking innovation to the farmers or to practitioners and not getting their feedback on the success might have resulted in some of the innovation having a very high you find that it is adopted, but it is then disadopted again because we don't have feedback mechanism. So to mitigate that, we're promoting effective farmer feedback mechanism. Then the strengthening of the extension services in the packaging and use of digital innovation is one of the options that we think will transform our agriculture in the new normal.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was not aware I thought there was another slide.
No, you right on time. You know, when my VPA was saying, you were right on time. And thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we can hear the whole issue of digitalization. It's coming again and again. And you were mentioning about, you know, curriculum, how curriculum should change and all that. On this note, we want to hear from the academic side. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to Kenya. Here in our midst, we have Professor Rose Monya. She's the Vice Chancellor at Egerton University. Prof, give me an indication if you are there so that we can hear your voice while I'm sharing a little bit about your background. Prof, are you there?
No, she's not there.
She's not there. Okay. They say the train doesn't wait for people, people wait for the train. If Prof is not there, let me just, you know, pose, you know, the questions that we would have liked her to respond to. And I would like to challenge those of you in attendance, if you are coming from academic institutions, let's see if you can be able to respond, you know, to some of these questions because you also have, you know, those experiences. Okay. Okay, so these are the questions that I would have liked to pose to Prof. What is the role of universities in complementing the delivery of agriculture advisory services and providing a platform for all stakeholders within the neutral space in the new normal? So what is the role of universities? So I would like some of you who are coming from academic institutions who have, you know, a bit of experience in this to use your chat box and respond to those questions. And when during the Q&A, maybe I could, you know, take some of you to share your experiences. The second question that I would have loved to ask is how can university reinforce and be, you know, that knowledge, you know, brokering and broker relationship amongst the food and nutrition security actors, you know, that nexus between food and nutrition. And again, how can universities play a role in agriculture extension and advisory services in the new normal? What is the role of academic institutions or institutions of higher learning? So those of you who are coming from institutions of higher learning, please send your input and use the chat box as we move forward. Okay, let us see. Thank you as you are responding and engaging. Again, institution of higher learning. Irene, are you there?
Hello, do you hear me?
Okay, Irene is there. Yes, I can hear you. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you Miss Irene Lynette Akidi. She's a PhD student at Egerton University. Let me give you a little bit of background of who she is. As I was looking at her profile, I was very impressed because, you know, she brings a lot of, you know, knowledge. She's not only coming here as a student, but she's also coming here having a wealth of knowledge. She's serving at Gulu University as an assistant lecturer and research assistant under the RISE Community Action Research Project. She's an expert when it comes to action research related issues. As I have indicated, she's doing a PhD in agribusiness management at Egerton University in Kenya. It is a program that is sponsored by the Center of Excellence in Sustainable Agriculture and Agribusiness Management. That is a mouthful. She's also currently working with communities because she does, action research. She also does a bit of mentoring, mentor youth in entrepreneurship, but also she's more experienced in the issues of, value chain analysis, market participation, farmer governance structures, and livelihoods of rural women. So, Irene, the question that I would like you to respond to, may you please enable your video so that we can see you? There we go. Thank you so much. So the question that I would like you to speak to is what is your experience in delivering extension and advisory services through the Student Center Outreach Program, from the Student Center Outreach Program? How have been what are your experiences in that area? Lastly, what should be done to improve the delivery of agriculture extension services to smallholder farmers? What is your take on these two questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Ngwenya. Allow me first go through the background. Whenever we hear about COVID, a lot of things come into our mind, but COVID has a disproportionate impact on the poor through job loss, loss of remittance, rising prices, and disruption in services such as education and healthcare. And then with this COVID pandemic, we expect that the poverty rates will go up for the first time since 1998. That is 40 to 60 million people will fall into extreme poverty. That means that they cannot live above $1.93 a day. And majority of these poor people are expected to be in sub-Saharan Africa, but most especially in the rural population where we see most of our farmers thrive. And then extension plays a very fundamental role in building producers' capacities to maintain the good agricultural practices, link producers to inputs, and also markets. Allow me share the challenges. Next slide, please. Some of the challenges for extension and agriculture advisory services. We have delayed services, inputs, and outputs. For example, during this COVID pandemic, we realized that transport was cut off, movement was limited. And so our farmers were left with very little option in terms of receiving these services. You realize that a service that should have been offered in the month of March was offered late in the month of April. And this sets back all the process within the producer chain. Inputs were delayed because most of these inputs move through public transport from places like Kampala up to Gulu. You realize that at this time, farmers complained that there were no seed. Time for planting was ready, but you'd find that these stores had no seed, and this was also a grave challenge. Even outputs, most of the output also moves through the public transport from these areas of plenty, that is where the farmers grow the crop, to the areas of scarcity in the markets, but you realize that the transport was frozen. And so these farmers were stuck with a lot of perishable commodities that they couldn't have to the market. Then we have labor shortages, especially during the peak periods. As you can look at the photo in the slide, you realize that most farmers in northern Uganda work as a group. It is more of group labor, and where you find a group of 20 to 30 farmers or even above that working in a single field. This is how they mobilize labor. But when COVID came in, it limited these organizations, the labor organizations that the farmer have, because you couldn't gather more than 5 people in one field. And so this led to a very big challenge where most of the farmers lost their crop, especially due to weed and also inadequate labor to harvest in time. Then we had increased prices of agricultural inputs because they had, at this time when the lockdown started, we had an issue of transport. Farmers couldn't easily access these inputs from their outlet shops. And when these input dealers realized that that was the case, what they decided to do was whatever they had in stock had to double in price. And most of these farmers couldn't afford. So it was left to those who can afford to take it up all. Then marketing challenges, I've talked about it, where movement is restricted, and so farmers were left with heavy losses from their outputs. Next slide, please. Some of the opportunities I view here is a collaborative extension and advisory service system. And when I say collaborative, like for the student-centered outreach program, I mean that the university has a role to play, private sector has a role to play, the government has a role to play, and any organization, be it NGO, that is working in the field of extension has a role to play. Let the word collaborative come out of the papers where we say collaborative, but not put into action. This is the time that calls for collaborative in action, not in words. Then there is need to shorten the supply chain, and this has been echoed by my previous panelists. Shorten the supply chain so that the procurement issues are lessened within the value chain, and farmers are able to easily market their products in the shortest time possible. Then the greatest opportunity I see this is that the job opportunities for the youth to come up with innovative things for making agriculture actually cool. Less contact, but knowledge is delivered to the farmers at the right time in the right moment. Next slide, please. Now, what extension and extension services to the smallholder farmers in the new norm? The most important thing, and what have been holding dear to me, is identify and track farmers' needs through social media. This time, the time when we received the lockdown, I had a number of farmer groups that were planting their rice, actually multiplying the seed. And so, since I couldn't get to some of these farmers, what I did was to try to identify farmers that could access social media, that is WhatsApp, and we would communicate through WhatsApp for every step of the process. If there was an issue of planting, we would communicate, and I would send something small so that they could see the demonstration of what should be done. And this is where it calls for that. But the challenge with this also, you realize that most of the farmers cannot afford these smartphones. So a mere phone call sometimes doesn't do much compared to WhatsApp, where I can share a video with the farmers. So there is also a gap within this social media issue. Then promoting producer organizations. I think this is the time where we need to promote the producer organizations to move away from just recipients of knowledge. These people have rich knowledge, but also to enable some of the leaders within these producer organizations to disseminate this knowledge within the communities in which they are located. This will also help us avoid issues of us gaining contact with the farmers in this crucial moment. Then the next point is remote capacity building of lead farmers and grassroots organizations. This also relies on the same point, but we need lead farmers. For example, under the Rice Cup, we have a community knowledge worker, and this is someone within the community that actually is trained, capacity is built for this person, in that when Irene has a research assistant is not around, this person normally steps in. This person monitors all the processes of the project that are ongoing from planting up to harvesting. So this is the route that we need to take up. Then also linking farmers to markets. This is a very good opportunity. This is also another bit of the things that I've been doing in the field with the farmers. What happens is that since I have a number of farmer groups that I work with, I help identify market opportunities for other farmer groups through farmers themselves. You find that if a farmer needs a seed, a rice seed, and there is a seed producing group that I know of, what I tell them is I create that awareness that, did you know that there is this seed producing group? And I give them the contacts. And that is that is the linkage that we want. And the linkage should also go digital. Then connecting to psychological or behavioral counseling. This was hinted on by another panelist. This is very important because the effect of COVID has been very grave. We all didn't expect it to take this twist, but the farmers are psychologically tortured. If you talk to some of them, they will tell you that it seems that they have lost hope, but it is us who are the frontline workers in extension that have to bring back this hope. But also our capacity has to be built to enable us handle canceling bit of it, because you may not have everything with you, but your capacity can be built to handle that component. And this is a very critical component, because when the mind is free, we expect that a free mind can achieve a lot in this life. Then building partnerships to overcome market disruptions and ensure the supply chain functioning is also another critical component. Private sector, farmers, and all value chain actors need to actually strengthen this partnership, the partnership that they have, so that the supply chain functioning is not disrupted. Some of the innovations, digitalization of the extension and advisory service process, and this is being tried out by Gulu University. We have a farmer call center that is running. What happens is that the farmer calls in. When they call in, they talk about the problem that they are facing, and a solution is granted to them through someone who's running the farmer call center. I think this is a great process that can help to eliminate the physical contact between the farmers with the extension workers. Then we have a collaborative extension and advisory service. I repeat this because it is very important. Need to strengthen the coordinated governance of the pluralistic extension and advisory system, made up of public and private sector, producer organization, farmer groups, and also other networks. And this could be NGOs and non-NGOs. Then facilitating and entering into partnerships with many, often non-traditional actors in the agriculture innovation system. Thank you. I think this is something to think about, but it should be something that I would like everyone to take home from me, is that to ensure continued access to extension and advisory services, it is key to combine the adoption of digital tools with the strengthening of the outreach mechanisms that are already existent and grassroots institutions to improve the efficiency, inclusion, resilience, and timeliness of extension support beyond the current COVID-19 crisis. And I would like to echo out that most of the time, that female farmers are left out during this time of crisis. And so we need an inclusive process that will not leave out any vulnerable member of the community, but include everyone else. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you, Irene. One thing that I picked is one thing that you emphasized a lot, to say collaboration in action, not on paper. So this is what we need. We need collaboration in action, not on paper. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I see the Q&A, it's actually coming up. I see there is a poll here. If you see there is a poll that is there, a poll in progress. So ladies and gentlemen, look at it and please vote or use, the poll that is actually showing. Yes, during the session, just use the poll, respond to the poll as we continue. Okay, so in our program, we were supposed to have the representation or representative from ROPA, which is the farmer organization in West Africa. And I understand that he might not be with us. Is that correct? Francis? Is Mr. Ibrahim with us?
No.
Okay, so this gives an opportunity to those of you who are coming from farmer organizations. These are the questions that I would have liked to ask him. Or maybe let me pause a little bit so that you do your poll. Okay, yes. So these are the questions that I would have liked to ask him from the farmer organization perspective. How extension and agriculture services innovate from within to ensure an effective and efficient response to COVID? How can extension and agriculture services innovate from within? Because we know that farmer organizations also provide some advisory services and all that. How do we innovate from within so that we make sure that we become more effective and efficient in responding to COVID. But also, how can farmers strengthen their organizational capacities? How do we strengthen organizational capacities to make sure that, you know, farmers continue to access agricultural inputs and they continue to produce and have access, you know, to market information and all that? And as you respond to this question, I want you to pay attention to what Irene said. Hair farmers, they will come and work together. But now during COVID, they have to do social distancing, where it means that they cannot actually come together anymore. So how do we strengthen our farmer organizational capacities in that context, where they also have to have, you know, social distancing? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving with our program, and now before we go to Q&A, I want us to go to Mali, where we have, you know, Dr. Sokona Daknoko. She's our discussant. She has listened to our presentation. She has engaged with our panelists, you know, speaker notes and all that. We want to hear from her. What do you take from this? But before I call her on stage, I just want to share with you who she is. She is the country director of Sasakawa Africa Association office in Mali. And she also serves as Ruforum, you know, she serves as Ruforum as part of, you know, the technical team. She has a lot of experience. I was reading her bio and I was like, wow, 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 Africa, we have wealth of expertise. She has experience in, you know, biometry. She does a lot of, you know, experimental designs and, you know, statistic analysis of complex data sets. She's a plant breeder. She, you know, she also has experience in agricultural extension, monitoring and evaluation. She's also an expert in gender and participatory approaches. She holds a master's degree in animal sciences, measuring welfare nutrition, which she got from a university in Canada. Then she went all the way to the US, to the Cornell University, to do her PhD in plant breeding and genetics. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Daknoko. Dr. Daknoko, it's your turn now. May you please, you know,
Okay.
unmute yourself so that people can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah. So maybe before you share what you want to share, I would like you to respond, you know, to the panel presentation. But in your response, also use your own experiences. But also, I would like you to advise on what new model for agriculture extension and advisory services should be in the current and post, you know, COVID era. Having heard what you have had, what is that new model that we should be looking at during the pandemic, but also beyond COVID? Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Shall I share my views first before the slides?
Yes, you can.
Okay. All the panelists, I think they have said a lot of relevant extension in the new normal. Some people, like most of them actually, have set the context under which COVID-19 pandemic occurred. Some people have talked about the desert locusts, fall armyworm. I'm adding to that climate change. I'm adding also population increase, which means much more mouth to feed. We also have reduced mobility within and outside countries, which means more youth who need to be attended because they don't have the possibility for migration outside the continent or within. Increased urbanization is an issue, is part of the context actually, meaning that fewer people are engaged in agriculture, also meaning that we need more technologies to be used in agriculture, and also meaning that the fewer people who will be engaged in agriculture will have much more opportunities to sell their production because everybody needs agriculture for food. The context also, I want to add large gaps between population growth rate, at least for the case of Mali, and agricultural growth, which also means we have a lot of to do to increase agricultural productivity to fill that gap. The context also include social and political insecurity, perhaps not everywhere, and terrorism, perhaps not everywhere. We have a lot of youth because the youth population proportion in our populations is usually over 50%, meaning that, and they are faced with unemployment. And now with the context, no school, so we need those youth to be attended much more as than previously. So this is the context under which COVID-19 has come, like to worsen the situation. Among the changes, many other panelists have talked about the changes, the main change being disrupted agricultural value chains and food systems, transport restriction blocking access to food and markets, and youth migration, disruption of the formal training and process with closure of schools and universities, and accelerated use of e-extension and distance learning. On top of that, I would like to mention the opportunities. A lot of the panelists have also referred to the opportunities, and I have just put together those opportunities, adding mine also. The opportunities include increase in the demand of locally produced food, increase in commercialization opportunities for the future because agriculture is less attractive to youth, and increase in the demand of agri-extension and advisory services provision, increased global attention to agri-food systems and financing opportunities, and increase in the need for new technologies, new skilled personnel, and new agricultural practices and agricultural machineries. Now, as solutions for now and after COVID-19, I believe we need...
Doctor?
Yes.
Let me disturb you a bit. So hold on those solutions that you have gathered from the presenters. I would like you to have sufficient time to share what you have prepared with your slide. And if we still have sufficient time, then we'll go back to that analysis. Is that fine?
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So the slide you are just seeing now on the screen is the agri-extension continuum. As you can see, it is a continuing process. It cannot stop. And the main goal is to increase productivity, income, and livelihoods. Next, please. Okay, so this is showing the stakeholders involved in agri extension continuum and their interactions with one another. You can see that the continuum begins with extension services and the farmers, and these people can also be found at every stage of the process. And after farmers need assessment, identification of gaps, we work together, I mean extension agents and farmers, work together with research institutions, universities, and other actors of the private sector to design solution packages and extend those solution packages to farmers. So the extension of the solution packages to farmers need extension delivery vehicles that would maximize the adoption of the solutions by farmers and the effectiveness in terms of attainment of the goals of the extension program. So once the solutions are extended to the farmers, what we need is interaction between all the stakeholders that I have mentioned before. That interaction is much needed to extend the solutions to farmers. And this slide is actually, the previous slide was like the previous situation before the COVID. This is showing the situation before the COVID. It is working perfectly, so the continuum is working perfectly. With the outbreak of the pandemic, it has been disrupted. No more interaction between, or at least reduced interaction between all the stakeholders, and the components disrupted, broken apart from each other. This is the situation that Sasakawa Africa Association faced when the pandemic occurred. And during the first 2 months, no extension because of working from home. So we got worried. We said, with this situation, how are we going to do the extension work? So we said, maybe we should go back to the stakeholders, especially the farmers and other stakeholders, to hear their voices about the impact of the COVID-19 on their activities. And also we wanted the study to make recommendations to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the food systems. And under this study, we managed to reach representatives of all stakeholders involved in agricultural value chains. A total of 105 respondents were reached across the whole country of Mali, from Kai region in the southeast to Kidal in the north, from Kai in the southwest to Kidal in the northeast. And this is showing the impact of the outbreak of COVID-19 on farmers. 52% of farmers reported reduced access to post-harvest and agro-processing. 90% reported labor scarcity. 81% reported reduced access to extension agent and the trainings they provide. And according to 81% of the farmers, if nothing is done to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, there will be food and nutrition insecurity in a near future. Next, please.
Yeah.
So this is showing also the impact of COVID-19 on other stakeholders of the value chain. 82% of input dealers reported irregular operation of input shops and limited sales, whereas we have 67% of financing institutions who reported reduction in loan repayment and servicing and reduced loan repayment and rural credit flows. So we have also surveyed the university teachers and the students, and 100% of them reported school shut off, disruption of contact with teachers, no more teaching, and approximately 3,000 students from partner universities, SAA partner universities, were left by themselves after the outbreak of the COVID-19. Next, please. So in face of all those impacts, the study recommended the development and implementation of pilot projects to develop new extension approaches, especially the e-extension platform, to facilitate technology transfer mechanisms for farmers by using ICT, and also to strengthen the supply chain by using ICT to improve farmers' access to input and output markets. And the management wanted this to be a step-by-step approach. First of all, applying innovative methodologies and technologies in the pilot project, and the proven methodologies and technologies would be scaled up later, taking into account the pandemic situation within the country and outside. This slide is showing the status of implementation of the Mali pilot project. And like we said, we have tried to embrace a digital extension and distance learning, because at Sasakawa, we have the two programs, the Agric Extension Program and the Human Resources Development Program, in which we work in partnership with universities and agricultural training institutions. So for the Agric Extension part, we said we will embrace e-extension, and for this, we, in the pilot project, targeted 70 extension agents and farmers, to which we handed over smartphones, tablets, airtimes. And this was done during a one-day workshop under the chairmanship of the Ministry of Agriculture. And we also developed 6 training modules on crop productivity, post-harvest handling, and business development. And the modules were recorded on video and audio media in French and the local language Bambara. We also conducted one-day orientation session of the beneficiaries on how to adequately use the smartphones and to use the social media. We also developed an online platform, etc. Okay, so this slide is just showing the photos of the one-day workshop during which we launched officially the Mali pilot projects, and we handed over. This one is showing the woman farmer receiving her smartphone from the representative of the Ministry of Agriculture. And the below photo is showing the rector of the University of Cebu receiving his ICT tools. And this one is the group photo.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. I'm going to stop, sharing the video so that we can see what is happening here. Thank you very much. And you summarized nicely what you have listened to from the panelists, but also I like that you also show some practical examples of how you have done it in Mali. And that brings us, some exciting insight. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the moment of truth is here, where we want to take, the Q&A. I can see that the chat box has been up and running. Let me see. Okay, my panelists, I would like you to unmute yourselves all together and enable your videos so that we can be together on the screen. And let's see what kind of questions are coming and which ones have you responded to and which ones do we need to respond to. You need to help me. I see there are almost 42 questions that are there. Let me see, Francis, if you have managed to pick some of the questions, please help me out. Okay. Okay, so we had asked people to actually indicate whom they directing the question to. Let me see. Francis, do you see anything directed to anyone?
Yes, there's a question directed to Dr. Slim.
Okay, yes, may you please read it for him?
To Dr. Slim, please, how do we coordinate all the efforts, especially in Africa? This is from Mercy Akereduro.
Okay, so Dr. Salim, just, hold on to that question. Let us take another one that is directed to someone else. I think there is a question that I see here from Tembi Ngoto. She's saying, how are the Ruforum universities preparing responsive future professionals? Are these specific problems being put in place? I don't know whom this question will be directed to. Maybe we pass that one and I'll ask, the Ruforum Secretariat just to respond to that question on the chat box. So let us see which other question. Dr. Salim, maybe respond to that one in the meantime while we look for other questions that are directed to other panelists.
Okay, one I think is that there are a lot of country initiatives. I mentioned some few of them in Uganda under UFAS. UFAS is the country chapter of AFAS. There's been some in Kenya, there have been some in Nigeria, Malawi, and several other countries are coming on board on on response mechanisms, especially use of digital tools and so on. And what AFAS is doing as a continental body, other than saying we are going to coordinate, what we do is we help and support some capacity building in terms of capacity building, and as well as sharing and lesson learning on how best to use these digital tools and mechanisms and so on, foresight and so on in some of these situations. So our role as AFAS is lesson learning, capacity building and so on, and building, introducing new mechanism, methods and so on, and learning tools. So that's what we do, and they learn from the forum itself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think there was a question also to Irene. I think there was a question from Wilborn Yegon. He's saying, how can we ensure farmers transit from normal face-to-face to digital platforms? What is it that we can do to ensure that farmers move away from normal face-to-face to digital platform? Please, may you please respond to that?
I think one thing is a mindset, really.
It is a mindset.
Biggest, I think, bottleneck is a mindset, especially in extension. Extension, right from education to practice and continuous education is face-to-face. And the farmers are mostly used to that. But I alluded to the youth who are coming into extension, but also into farming. So the mindset issue is there, but also building capacities and in terms of training, curriculum, right from the beginning and so on, to migrate into that. And now as you move more into the governments, and so on. You need the initial infrastructure. You need infrastructure for digital tools, digital mechanisms, and so on. The other thing is, unfortunately, as we move more and more into, well, as you know, a lot of farmers and extension workers really now have phones and so on. They have radios and so on, and it's being used really at great length. Unfortunately, some governments have made it sort of like a cash cow. Some countries have made, they imposed taxes on some of these digital tools and digital platforms and so. And some of those things have to be, I think we have to advocate against use of those platforms as a governments and so on. The last one really is content. When you look at them, content is also a problem. We need appropriate content for the right people at the right time, so on, and also the working rules of the game, and so on. So those are some of the things that I think could happen.
Okay, Carl, there is a question for you. Someone is saying, how can the vulnerables be supported to pay for extension? What is your take on that? That goes to Carl.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, there's been a ton of questions around that I have been trying to answer while I have been listening in.
Yes.
To me, the thing is, it is, in principle, it is a government responsibility, in principle. And if the government doesn't take that responsibility, who will? Who see this as their responsibility? There is a lot of smallholder farmers who cannot afford, especially the way that we do extension today, that some person take a bus or a motorbike or a vehicle, drive out to the farmers, talk to the farmers, drive again. That's an extremely expensive way of conveying messages in 2020. That's why I say we have to go digital. Still, even if you go digital, the farmers will not be digital literate. So you need to have an interface in the community to help that. That person can be sponsored. But all what we see a lot of invention coming up now, but they are all run in project modes by NGOs and others. It's not mainstreamed into the government system. For me, for things to be sustainable, it has to be a government obligation. But sorry to say, small-scale farmers are not interested in government because they have no voice, they have no power, they are not of interest. So until you get your governments to be interested in your farmers, in your citizens, you don't move anywhere. You have to run in this emergency, piecemeal, project donor mode. It doesn't work. There is no solution except government. I'm sorry to say, I don't see it. If anybody else see it, feel free to speak.
Okay. There are a lot of, okay, I think there's something for Dr. Dlamini. How do we enhance, okay, fine. I need to, okay, let me read it. Okay. How do we enhance extension work via e-extension in rural areas with a rate of illiteracy? I think Carl has responded briefly to that, but Dr. Dlamini, do you want to respond to that? To add your 2 cents on that, how do we enhance extension work via e-extension in rural areas where there are high rates of illiteracy?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ngwe. I think Carl has already alluded to that, but what I can say is that in Southern Africa, the extension workers are supposed to sensitize the majority of the farmers. And they work with lead farmers. Most lead farmers are semi-literate farmers. The lead farmers and the young farmers are the ones that become instrumental in actually assisting the so-called illiterate farmers. So we do have a population of semi-illiterate young farmers and lead farmers that are assisting us together with the extension officers in that regard.
Okay, thank you. And I think I read.
Hello?
Irene, are you there?
Hear you.
Yes, I think I would like to hear your comment. I mean, listening to the discussions currently, what will be your final word to say, let me add my 2 cents there? Probably you also have seen what people are commenting around. I think the main issue here is we're talking about digitalization and the gap. How do we close, that gap between the digitalization and the context within which we are operating with illiterate farmers and the distance and all that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll re-echo my voice on what Dr. Slim said. Most of the times it is the mindset, but we are the frontline workers in extension are the close people to these communities. So when we go into the community, they are not afraid of us anymore. They look at us as one of them. So what happens is that, and what we should take keen interest in is that we need to talk to these farmers, just like I did to my farmers. At first it was, the process was a little long as they were not receiving easily, but with continual talking to them and told them, you see, now I can't visit you in the field, but I can send you a video. I can't visit you in the field, but I can send you a message. And when I kept calling them like on a weekly basis, and then after that, I made it 2 weeks, they told me that they feel like they've not yet lost the touch. They still get the information. And so it would be a better way to even go because it is far cheaper. And they tell me, oh, you didn't have to travel that long. The road, the bad roads, the unfortunate things you meet on the way, but you could still deliver in the shortest time possible. Because when I'm called to go to the field, it takes you like 3 to 4 hours to drive there. But now I can get up my phone, send a video, a training video that only lasts within a minute. The farmer has it. And then let me address a question that was forwarded to me from Fedukan. Was asking me, who is a CKW, like a community knowledge worker. This is a person that is based within the community, that is selected by the community themselves. I thank Reforum through the Rice Cup project at Gulu that they enabled us to know that this person is actually existent, because in that project we had to get a community knowledge worker. So this person is normally selected by the community themselves. It's like a game changer within the community, selected and trusted by the community. And this person normally uses the phone to access information that he can freely pass on to other farmers.
Okay, thank you. Let me pick one more question. I think this one was directed to Dr. Sokona. I think Helen Kongai is saying, apart from jointly designing solutions to identified problems, in what suggested practical ways can universities, research institutions, government, and other stakeholders collaboratively distribute or contribute to the betterment of agricultural production and marketing and livelihoods? So what are some of, the tangible ways that we can contribute apart from, designing, solutions for the identified problems? Do you have any response to that, Dr. Sokona?
I have not seen the question, but hearing from you, how can universities and research institutions contribute to the solutions? The
betterment,
apart
yes.
from only designing. For instance, if I pick the case of universities, we have mentioned that now extension, I mean, with COVID-19, the provision of extension service is much needed. So that means universities need to train more professionals, more people skilled with extension skills that are needed for the pandemic era or post-pandemic. We are talking about more and more use of e-extension. We are talking about the need for technologies. Researchers and universities are the ones who develop the technologies. So I think we need them to develop technologies. It could be new varieties, it could be machineries, it could be good agricultural practices. We need them to develop more and more innovations that are much needed for the COVID or post-COVID era, and also to train through formal or informal training the people who can use those innovations, those technologies, the innovative solutions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are 10 minutes to landing. And within these 10 minutes, I'm going to ask, my panelists, let me start with Dr. Selim. Dr. Selim, in less than, 30 seconds, what is your final take? Really less than 30 seconds. What is the key message that you are taking home with, having listened to the discussions from other panelists, but also having listened to the discussions that in the Q&A? What is your take?
Well,
in less than 30 seconds.
What I can say is that consistently the message is digital tools, use of digital tools and so on. And somebody said it could be expensive. But actually in the long run, use of digital tools, mass media and so on, is the cheapest message, the cheapest mechanism and method of extension in the long run. But it has to have various aspects to it. You need, like I said, the infrastructure, you need to develop content, rules of the game, and so on. You need a bit of coordination, and so on and so forth. So, and then capacity, has been mentioned, is a mindset change. And the capacity we are talking about right from the university and all, because that's where we are going. And I can, like I mentioned again, the youth are actually the prime takers of digital tools and mechanisms. So that's the way to go, irrespective of COVID. But again, COVID actually is a big silver lining because governments are beginning to come in and noting that that's the way to go.
Okay, Irene, in less than 30 seconds, what have you picked from the discussion? What is that, take-home message for you?
Thank you so much, Dr. Ngwenya. The first thing is, as Selim has said, we need digitalization, but my most important aspect would be a collaborative effort from all the providers of extension and advisory services so that we don't duplicate what other people do in the field, but we work together towards a common cause, and that is helping that farmer that really actually needs the help. And another important thing that I would iron out is the need for this to be an inclusive process, where where a woman who doesn't have access to even a phone, or during time that the radio is being listened to somewhere else, she's somewhere else doing some other chores, is also included within this process, has access to this information. So we need a really concerted effort to bring an extension system that is inclusive and does not discriminate against anyone within the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. In less than 30 seconds, what are your last take-home message?
My word is accountability.
Accountability.
We need extension workers to be accountable to the farmers, and we need the governments to be accountable to their people. If we can make those two work, then we are gone a long way in solving the problems.
We need to think, how do we actually make that work? But okay, Dr. Lamini, what is your final really take-home message listening to all these discussions?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Ngwenya. My final take-home message would be that national governments have to take their position. They have to take their position like governments in the US are doing. Is doing. They have to take responsibility and then convene the multi-stakeholder roundtable around research, agriculture research and development, involving government itself, the civil society organizations, the private sector, and the local communities or the farmers. I think that, to me, that is, government has to rise and shine at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Dr. Sokona, in less than 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I would say that based on the fact that there has been a lot of disruption in the food supply chain, in agricultural value chains, then we need to mobilize what I would say the soldiers needed to fight. Yes, needed to fight that disruption. Just like in when a health issue occurred in a region, we mobilized the healthcare providers. Now the value chain, agricultural value chain, food systems is disrupted. So we need to mobilize the soldier we need for that, and those soldiers, to my opinion, are the extension workers, are the research institutions, are the universities, to come to work together to address the issues we are now facing with the pandemic outbreak.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On this note, I would like to thank all the panelists. I think from, when I'm looking at the chat box and people are saying excellent presentations, we have learned a lot. I also have learned a lot. My final take-home message is that we're talking about digitalization and we're talking about the change of mindset. But this is not only the change of mindset of the farmers, but it's also the change of our mindset. If I were to take an example with digitalization, I actually have to let go of power because I'm being taught by my 14-year-old boy for so many things, because it changes the power relations. So when we talk about the change, that change of mindset, we also have to be mindful of that. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close, but I would like to call Dr. Florence again on behalf of Ruforum to give us, the closing remarks. Dr. Florence?
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. And thank you all the panelists. It was excellent, absolutely well done. And as you can note from the chat, that it was really good. And listening to all of you, I see why we have these webinars, because we want to get the voices from the different perspectives, and you have absolutely nailed it. I like Irene a lot. I said from the beginning, it is a demonstration that the students can be able to do something on the continent. If we can get our universities together, get them to get additional capacity, that is very good. And I like what all of you are saying about us mobilizing our governments, because as Rule Forum, we may not have that financial muscle to get the farmers to move, the agriculture sector to move, but we do have a voice, and you are providing part of that voice. Thank you very much for doing that. We continue with this process. We are going to synthesize all your discussions, and we are going to try to take them to the powers that be, the ones that matter, and see that this dialogue can be able to start. Otherwise, I want to thank you very much. Thank you for coming to be with us. Thank you, Dr. Ngwenya. That was brilliant moderation. Thank you very much. And to our participants, thank you very much. As said by Dr. Dlamini, if you are not here, the webinar is not here. So thank you very much for making this a very colorful and fruitful webinar. We shall take all those questions that have not been answered, even those that have been answered, and we shall be able to compile them nicely and then be able to share them to the different actors, because this is about galvanizing actors into action. Thank you very much. Please do join us on the 7th for the next webinar, which will be focusing on how the policymakers can be able to participate in this. So we are taking all this that you have brought here to the next webinar. It will be taking place on the 7th, and it is discussing with policymakers. People from AU will be part of that, and people from the EU will also be part of that. So we see you then on the 7th of September. Thank you very much, and goodbye.